The Troublesome Creek Witch Trial, Kentucky's last execution in 1893 Kentucky. A woman perished because her community believed she was a witch, and the court recorded every detail. Long shadows fall across Troublesome Creek in the mountains of Knott County, Kentucky, where the hollows run deep and the outside world remains a distant concern. In 1893, these isolated valleys harbor beliefs that have faded from most of America, traditions carried across the ocean and preserved in the mountain isolation like artifacts sealed in amber. Here, witchcraft is not superstition or folklore. It is understood as genuine threat, as real as winter cold or summer drought, and the community possesses its own methods for dealing with such dangers. Emma Baker lives along Troublesome Creek, her days following the rhythms that govern all mountain life in this era. She tends her household, maintains her garden, moves through a community where every family knows every other family, where histories stretch back generations, where reputations are built slowly and destroyed quickly. She does not know that her neighbor Doc Baker, a man who shares her surname but not her bloodline, watches her with growing suspicion, his mind turning over symptoms he cannot otherwise explain. Doc Baker's family suffers. Illness moves through his household with persistence that defies natural explanation. His children weaken, his wife grows pale, the livestock sicken, crops that should flourish struggle in soil that has always produced abundance. Doc Baker, a man raised in these mountains and educated in the belief systems that govern mountain life, begins the diagnostic process his culture has taught him. He eliminates natural causes. He considers the patterns. He observes which families prosper while his own suffers. The logic of his tradition points him toward a conclusion that his community understands and accepts. Emma Baker is a witch. This determination, reached through the interpretive framework Doc Baker has inherited from generations of mountain dwellers, transforms his neighbor from a familiar presence into an active threat. The persistent illness afflicting his family is not accident or misfortune. It is attack. Emma Baker, through powers his tradition recognizes as real, has targeted his household for harm. The symptoms align with what his culture identifies as witch work. The diagnosis is clear. Within the witch belief framework operating in Knott County in 1893, identification of the witch is only the beginning. The tradition provides remedies, escalating responses to escalating threats. Lesser methods exist for lesser dangers, protective charms, counterspells, rituals designed to deflect or neutralize witch power. But for serious attacks, for persistent assault that threatens family survival, the tradition acknowledges a final remedy. The witch must be eliminated. Physical removal of the source removes the threat. The logic is direct, practical, protective. Doc Baker arms himself. The decision he makes is not spontaneous rage or temporary insanity. It is calculated response within a belief system that treats witch elimination as legitimate community protection. He approaches Emma Baker's residence with purpose that is documented later in testimony that preserves his reasoning with unusual clarity. He does not hide his intentions. He does not flee afterward. He acts within what he understands as justifiable defense of his family against supernatural assault. The gunshot echoes across Troublesome Creek. Emma Baker falls, her life ending in a moment that divides Kentucky legal history from Kentucky cultural history. She perishes not because of personal conflict or property dispute or romantic entanglement. She loses her life because her community believes in witches, because that belief system includes prescribed responses to witch attack, and because geographic isolation has preserved traditions that make such responses seem not only acceptable but necessary. The legal machinery of Kentucky begins its work. Doc Baker is arrested, charged, and brought to trial. The court proceedings that follow become extraordinary documents of cultural collision. Urban legal frameworks meet mountain belief systems in testimony that is preserved in sufficient detail to allow subsequent generations to reconstruct the exact nature of witch belief operating in this community. Doc Baker testifies. His words enter the court record with specificity that historians later recognize as invaluable. He explains his reasoning. He details the symptoms that led to his diagnosis. He describes the belief system that made Emma Baker's identity as a witch apparent to him. He articulates the logic that made her elimination necessary for his family's survival. His testimony is not defensive or apologetic. He speaks as a man who has acted appropriately within the rules he understands. Community members testify in support of Doc Baker. Their words reveal a shared belief system, a collective understanding of how witchcraft operates and how communities protect themselves against it. The testimony documents specific diagnostic criteria for identifying witches. It preserves details about how supernatural attack manifests in the natural world. It records a living tradition that exists not in books or academic studies, but in the daily reality of mountain people whose isolation has allowed old beliefs to flourish while they fade elsewhere. The journalists arrive. Reporters from Kentucky cities and some from beyond state borders recognize the unusual nature of this case. Their dispatches carry news of the Troublesome Creek witch trial to readers who find it shocking that such beliefs persist in America as the 19th century approaches its end. The coverage brings urban attention to mountain realities, forcing encounter between worldviews that have developed in isolation from each other. The trial proceeds according to legal rules that do not accommodate witch belief frameworks. The court does not debate whether Emma Baker was actually a witch. It does not weigh the legitimacy of supernatural diagnosis or the appropriateness of community-based protective responses to witch attack. It applies Kentucky law as written, which recognizes no supernatural justification for taking human life. Doc Baker is found guilty. The verdict represents state authority overriding community tradition, external legal frameworks superseding local belief systems. He receives a prison sentence, removed from the mountains where his actions made sense within shared cultural understanding, and placed within a system that treats those same actions as criminal. The case marks a turning point. The Troublesome Creek witch trial becomes the last documented instance of open witch execution in Appalachian Kentucky. The legal consequences Doc Baker faces send clear messages to mountain communities that continue to operate within witch belief frameworks. The beliefs themselves do not disappear, but their expression changes. What was once community justice conducted in daylight becomes practice that must hide from external authority. Academic historians discover the Troublesome Creek case decades later. The detailed court testimony provides unprecedented documentation of living witch belief in late 19th century America. Researchers studying Appalachian culture recognize the trial records as primary sources of extraordinary value. The testimony preserves beliefs that are usually transmitted orally, that leave few written traces, that operate below the surface of official records. The case documents internal logic with unusual precision. The testimony reveals how witch identification functioned, what symptoms communities interpreted as evidence of supernatural attack, what remedies were considered appropriate for various levels of threat. The trial records capture a complete belief system at the moment of its collision with external legal authority, preserving details that might otherwise have vanished as mountain isolation decreased and old traditions faded. Troublesome Creek continues flowing through Knott County, its waters moving past the site where Emma Baker perished because her community believed in witches and one neighbor believed she threatened his family. The creek remembers nothing, but the court records preserve everything: a woman who lost her life, a man who acted within his tradition and paid the legal price, a community whose beliefs were real enough to produce lethal consequences. The case stands in Appalachian supernatural research as documentation of belief, producing documented real-world results. Emma Baker was not the victim of individual pathology or isolated madness. She perished within a functioning belief system that her entire community understood and many members accepted. The witch was real to them, the threat was real to them, and the remedy was real to them. The court records captured all of this with legal precision, preserving a moment when American law confronted American folk belief and asserted ultimate authority. The mountains keep their secrets, but the Troublesome Creek witch trial forced one secret into public record. Witch belief was alive in Kentucky in 1893, functional enough and genuine enough to result in a neighbor's passing, documented enough to provide subsequent generations with detailed evidence of how such beliefs operated when community isolation protected them from external challenge. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.